The property was discovered 1967. It was board was incorporated. In 1968, the first building was built out here for guest use. Tonight, as we celebrate those early years, we have some people who were around back in those days, 35 years ago, and we just thought it was a fit as the trustees met in a retreat for the week for 2 days here. We figured it's a good time to invite friends to recall those early years. Prior to that, I'd like to introduce the cook, and we can give him a big round of thanks. Russell, will you stand? And Scott, our assistant manager, is helping tonight in that area too. The rest of our staff, was Jeff here? Jeff's back here, and Paul, Sergey, Sam, raise your hands, will you, the crew? And we always have to recognize our camp managers, Darlene and Phil Corey. Darlene? Thank you for setup tonight, Darlene. It looks great. You did a great job. Carl Pearson has been doing some filming for us over the years, and we've asked him to record tonight, and we appreciate you coming out again, Carl, for that. Thanks.
We all make mistakes. What the heck?
I've asked Mayor to say a few words before we get going, Father Tracy, and then we'll turn it over to you. Mayor?
We've had a wonderful staff over all these years and very dedicated, and that goes for everybody on that staff. They're a great team. We also have had the pleasure of having a couple stay with us here over the last 8 years. He retired, and he didn't like being retired, and I know how that feels. He's been helping us and working with us, and he's going to be leaving us next year. And so Sam and Pat, would you mind standing up? And we've got a little something for you as a kind of a giveaway program that I don't know if you get seasick or not, but there's a nice trip up to Victoria here in an overnight.
I attended church in Lutheran church in Kirkland with Pat and Sam, and got to know them quite well many years back. And he always said he wanted to retire, work when he retires, he wanted to work at a Christian camp. And he says, well, it's not Christians close, but would you mind considering us? And so he and Pat moved up here 8 years ago, and actually built part of the next building in 1994. So it's almost 10 years ago, getting there. So thanks again for your 8 years. Sometime within next year they're going to be leaving us, and at least on the grounds, but thanks for those 8 years. When we talk about old timers too, we're going to leave out Paul, but we should mention Paul. Paul has been here 25, almost going on 26 years, Paul? 25. He is the heart of the campus, we call him, so thanks for all your years. Father Tracy, you've been around the longest as far as this camp goes. Would you take over here and introduce the rest of them? There's a microphone for the rest of you as it passes along. Yeah, just pass that along as you talk. Thanks.
Thank you, Randy. Before I go on, I want to say I appreciate Sam and all the work he's done, and Pat too. Pat served me dinner many times when she was here. Sam, you were a tremendous blessing to us here at the camp, and I hope you'll always feel at your home and welcome to come back here anytime. And if you want to stay at night, I'm sure we'll find accommodations for you too. So thank you, Sam, on behalf of all of us at Camp Brotherhood, the wonderful work you've done here, both in the building and cleaning up places and so on. You've been a real blessing to us. I suppose I am the senior person here for many ways. My beginning with Camp Brotherhood began about 6 years after on television. And everything had been going smooth up to that time until one morning I was officiating. I was in the center seat. I was the master of ceremonies that day. And so I had 2 minutes to introduce the program, as was the custom, and 2 minutes to wind it up and throw out the questions. So you felt a little power behind you. So after I made my introduction, I gave a question to, I think, wasn't Pastor Rolander, were you here that day? Where are you, Pastor Rolander? Yeah, if you remember, you may have been there that day. So I put a question to Rabbi, and he started out, and then he banged the table, "Stop this program," he said. And I thought, oh my God, I've blown it. I've offended the rabbi. We're off of the air. This is the end of the challenge. And they turned off the lights, and the cameramen all looked with their mouths open. What happened? And Rabbi said, "I can't hear my partners with this carpenter hammering next door." And Don McEwen, who is our announcer, was in the corner. And just like that, he said, "Rabbi, it seems to me that's not the first time you and your people had trouble with a carpenter." Were you there that day? That was a fantastic day, because everybody just laughed like you did. The cameramen and the floor directors, everybody, because, you know, for me, it was one of the greatest relief moments of my life. To know that I hadn't offended my dear friend, the rabbi. I thought, oh, I've done something awful because I was in charge of the program. But, you know, I'm sitting here tonight with Rich Lawson. He's across from me at dinner. Rich is an architect. And before Rich works on a building, he has it designed and drawn out to the smallest detail, the stairs and the windows and the doors and everything else. But that's not the way the rabbi operated on. So one morning after one of these programs, he said to me, "What are you doing today?" "Well, I'm a pastor at St. Patrick's Church in Seattle," and you never say you have nothing to do as a pastor. So, Father Jim, out of defense of the pastors, I said, "Well, I've got a few things to do." He said, "Can you drive to Mount Vernon with me?" I said, "Yeah, I guess I can." "What's going on in Mount Vernon?" He said, "I want to buy a farm." I said, "Rabbi, you know nothing about farming." He said, "Well, come on, get in the car and I'll explain to you." So when I look back on it, just recently I was thinking of this. The critical moments you make sometimes without a lot of time to think it through. Because on the way up to Mount Vernon, he said to me, our young people are living in ghettos. They don't know each other. They're just as they did 100 years ago. And I want to build a place where they can come together, get to know each other, and be prepared to live lives of respect and tolerance for one another in the future, and not all the bigotry we're experiencing or have experienced in the past because of religious affiliation. So I thought it over for a few minutes. I had no idea I'd be ending up here with a $5 million plant some years later, and a program that's now ready to go worldwide. And I said, I was the ambassador, I suppose, for the Catholic faith at the time, being a Catholic representative on TV. So I said, "Rabbi, I'll support you 100%. That's what we're trying to do on television." So he had been looking for a place for a camp for Camp Brotherhood. And he had some of his parishioners or people from the camp looking for a place, and they had located this farm which was for sale. The couple who lived here were Catholics, and they used to go to church in Mount Vernon, and they came to the stage they couldn't drive. So they put it in the market. So we come up, and Rabbi made this beautiful presentation to him. And I remember the owner, he looked at him very solemnly and nodded his head every so often. And then it turned to me, and I seconded the rabbi's presentation. It would be a great place for an interfaith center. Well, you remember, he was 80 years old. He grew up prior to Vatican II, Father Jim. And the idea of Catholics and Protestants and Jews and so on getting together was a novel idea for him. And he kind of looked a little, but when I spoke, he said, "Well, it seems good to me." But he said, "There's one problem. There's a man from California has an option on the place next Monday. But if he doesn't take it, you can have it." So I remember feeling just like a balloon that was deflated, coming back home and wondering what would happen. So that was on a Wednesday after we did a TV program. So the following Tuesday, we phoned up here to the gentleman, Mr. Goldade was his name, to know what the result was. Well, he said, the gentleman who had the option on the place was on his way up here to complete the papers. And he was in an accident in Portland. He wasn't seriously injured, but he ended up in the hospital. So he called me. And I told him that there was a rabbi and a priest interested in the place, and he said, give it to them. So that's why we're here tonight. I don't know who that gentleman was. I'd like to write, he's probably gone by now, the poor man, but I would love to have written to him and thank him for his offer, because he made it possible, along with Mr. Goldade, and then the friends who helped us to raise $22,000 of the $85,000 we paid for 300 acres here. So we had to sell 100 acres in the meantime. But perhaps that's how we got it started. So I'm going to take another minute or two, and then I'll turn it over to Rich Lawson. The idea of the rabbi was that we give some of this property here to the Jews, to the Catholics, to the Lutherans, to the Baptists, to the Methodists, put up their own building, have their own programs, but have some dialogue together, either through sports, through cultural exchanges, debates, a library, and so on. And that's the way I bought into it. That's what I had in mind when I said, yes, Rabbi, I'll support you. So, 1966, we completed the purchase of the place from the owners in November 1966. The next important event day, I don't know whether Justice Smith was there that day or not, was December 28, 1966. There's a meeting at the Washington Athletic Club, and the Wheelers and Dealers of Seattle was there. Were you there, Justice Smith? That was, you know, I've never put this in print, but I think one of these days I should for the sake of the record. So Rabbi and I presented what we had in mind to them. We asked if they would support this. And they all agreed to, you know, Rabbi has this project. I don't know how much it's going to involve, promise, but we'll give it our name. So they voted to approve of it. Correct, Justice? Right. So then I was assigned to call on the heads of the different churches, you know, who would supposedly support the place. The Presbyterians, the Lutherans, the Baptists. I remember the first one I called him was a Lutheran bishop. I forget his name then. Bishop? Who was it? Fielman, that's right. So he gave me a very courteous reception and so on, but he said, you know, we have a Luther camp. We can't afford to expand. Catholics couldn't afford to expand. The Baptists said they had a place up at Buck Creek. They all turned me down. Said, we can't afford it. This was 1967, remember, and almost 40 years ago, right out of Vatican II. So we'd just come out of the Cold War between the churches. And they weren't quite comfortable, just fraternizing, I think. I don't know. That's the reason they gave me officially. So here we are with 300 acres and no prospects of turning into the use we intended. So the scriptures talk of the psalmist, even though I walk through the dark valley, I fear no evil, for you're with me with your rod and your staff to give me courage. When I look back on 1967, I find that's where I was at that year in Rabbi. We're in the dark valley. We didn't know where we were going to go. And Mrs. Levine happened to meet Professor Choice from the University of Washington. And she told him about this crazy husband and a crazy priest that bought 300 acres and didn't know what to do with it now. He was ready to be sold. Well, he said he was interested in youth work, so he would propose to the seniors at the University of Washington if they would design a building and put it up, and he would evaluate them on it. And 14 of them agreed to design the building and put it up here under his direction, beginning in January 68. And most of you don't remember January 68 was one of the coldest winters in Seattle. The only other one that was worse was 1950. And while they were building it, some of their women, including Julie Lawson, the wife of her husband here, Rich, used to come up with meals for them. Julie you were most kind. You had a part to play in this building for the lodge here. So thank you very much, and the other wives. But I think now for a moment I'll take a break. I'll turn it over to Rich and his friends who helped to make it possible.
Thanks, Father Tracy. What happened while his story is going on, we had a little different story at the University of Washington. There were several of us students who were really tired of taking designs to a certain point and stopping. We never got to carry a design into fruition and see what it really would work out like. So we were talking on one side of the fence about finding a project to build. And of course, the administrators at the University of Washington School of Architecture didn't like that idea at all. They had us out swinging a hammer and the liabilities and everything else. But we were pretty strong about what we wanted to do. And then that's when Bob Joyce came in and said, I've got a project. And we said, well, what is it? And that's when it started. It was probably one of the greatest experiences anybody could have, especially being a student and taking their 5th year of school and being able to come up and build. So we ended up, the 14 of us, after designing the project and submitting it to the building department, getting our permit, we would take 2 days of the week, Monday and Tuesday, for our classes back in the city. And then we'd come up here and camp out in the farmhouse. We slept on the floor. We brought our noodles and our tuna fish and whatever we ate in those days. And we came up, we walked the sites, we found a place where we figured this has got to be the place for Fisher Hall. We drove the Caterpillars, we did the loaders, the snow was there. I remember the snow. It was cold. And we lived in that farmhouse, and we would spend the balance of the week here building this building. Graduation time came around later part of June, and half the people bailed, and there was about 6 or 7 of us who stuck on until we finished the project in August. Some of there's just tons of stories, but one that really comes out is we were pouring our slab in Fisher Hall. We had this really intricate design of wood slats with the concrete going in, and at that time a big fireplace was going to be formed up. Our well ran dry. So we were pouring concrete, we have no water, we were going to expose aggregate everything, brush it all down. What do? The well has run dry. We called a septic tank company out of Mount Vernon who cleans out septic tanks. Well, they had the truck and they pulled up some water from the lake, and they came in and they pushed this stuff down on the floor. It was gross. But we're in there scrubbing, and we got the aggregate all exposed on the floor. But boy, it was a chore. Never forget that one. Another story that I'll never forget. When we were meeting with Rabbi Levine and Father Tracy, he was talking about this interchange that he was going to have down on I-5, right down at the bottom of the hill, Lake McMurray. This big interchange, highway interchange. Before that, of course, we had to kind of work our way off the highway. And we all kind of laughed. Oh, sure, yeah, you're going to have an interchange. It's an interchange. He was an amazing guy. His wife, during the summer when we commuted up here, we commuted every day during the summer, gave us her pink Pontiac station wagon. So us He-Men every day rolled up here in this pink station wagon. Of course, never wanted to see anybody that we knew. And every day we're back and forth. And it was absolutely one of the most fun projects you could ever imagine. We learned how to build. We learned how to, in fact, one of the students, his father was a master carpenter. And if you've seen Fisher Hall, there's some really weird roof forms over the entry. He could not figure that out. I mean, he's trying to work off his framing square, and this is how you do, this is how you lay up the joists and everything. He could not work it out. And of course, we didn't know any different. We just lay up a string and put it on, cut it, and put it in. He walked off the job. He got so confused at one time, he said, I'm out of here. He left. But it was just, we just really enjoyed the project. I mean, everybody that finished the project got to see it finished. Turning the key over to Dan Evans to open it up. It was just a great experience.
You want to tell us some of the members of the class? One was killed in Vietnam, and where the others were known?
One member was killed in Vietnam. Another one had a pretty severe injury in Vietnam. Luckily, myself and there was 2 of us who had already been in the service prior to school, so we were lucky. We were the older 2, so we kind of ran the show. But a lot of the other guys had to get into the Vietnam situation. One of the students he was Japanese. He couldn't swing a hammer. He'd come up here and try to work, and it was something really foreign to him. But he's back in Japan now as a very prominent architect in Tokyo. Another one of the students who did finish the project out is a very prominent architect in Honolulu and teaches at the University of Honolulu and has a very large firm. And most of the other guys they're around in various architectural firms or on their own.
Beatty and...
No, they didn't. No.
Yeah? They work with you?
No.
Oh, okay.
There she goes again.
Give me instructions.
Yeah, give me instructions.
But thank you. Thanks, Julie. No, you did a good job. So did these women. I never met you at that time, but I heard how you brought up the meals to them and kept them safe when they slept on the floor in the coldest winter ever came.
That's right, we did that.
Now, one other thing we should have mentioned before we got to that stage, about January of 1967, and I want this to be on the record, the rabbi had selected a group of these people who attended the luncheon at the Washington Athletic Club on December 28, 1966, to form a board. Were you on the board just as you were? Were you at the rabbi's house that night? Oh my goodness, you'll be one of you're the only one I have. So we traveled the road. So the question was, I think at that time we had made the decision, found out that these other churches wouldn't support us. And would we take Professor Joyce's offer to put up a building and take whoever would come? So there was quite a hesitation on the board, but finally Rabbi said, it's either time to shut up or close shop. I always remember that night. And finally a vote was taken. They said, well, go ahead and build a lodge. And the money for the lodge came from Como, as well as the money for the new Warren building. Elizabeth Warren, where are you?
I'm hiding.
Elizabeth, your name should be up here too, along with your husband's, because he, by giving us the time, the television time on Sunday night, a free time at 6:30, he made it all possible. And also when we're at that crisis, Como helped to come through with I think it was $50,000 to get us started. Is that right, Rich, at the time? We just paid the bills, right? But tomorrow morning, when I make my presentation to you, I'll be asking you to give a 2-minute silence to Darby Brown. Remember Darby Brown? Darby was the coordinator with you, and he just died a few months ago.
I saw that.
Yeah. So he was with Hard Right Construction Company, and he was the coordinator who worked with the students when they're building Campbrotherhood. And in fact, just less than a year ago, when he was in his 90s, he was living in a retirement home in Bellevue. He wanted to come up here, but time didn't work out for me to bring him up, but he still had an interest in the camp. So that's how the camp got off of the ground. And some of these students came back in the summer of 1968 who weren't in school to finish it. And it was dedicated by Governor Evans in October 1968. And since then, perhaps 120,000 people have gone through Fisher Hall, different ones. So we have taken in, we're not in control of the programs that come here, but that's something I hope will be discussed tomorrow, that we will be taking control of going back to the original purpose of the camp, is to bring different religious groups together. And I will tell you some interesting proposals we have for that regard. But I think I'll turn it over to Justice Smith now to just give us his regard.
My wife, to whom I've been married for 48 years, loves me. very much. But she says that when I talk, I'm a rambling old man. And she made me promise that I would not do that this evening to bore the wonderful people who are joining us here this evening. I would like to especially pay tribute to Mrs. Warren. You may not know it, but I was a news commentator for Channel 4, KOMO, and Bill used to sign my checks. When we drove up today, despite some visual problems I'm having from some eye surgery, I could not help but feel a sense of great awe as we approached this environment. The sun was shining, the trees are green, the buildings are there, and it was sort of like one of those openings that you see in a visual depiction of the promised land. And I thought to myself, this is what the vision of Father Tracy and Rabbi Levine was, that in this meadow there would emerge, with the help of the many people who were part of it, this wonderful institution, which is of itself a thing of natural beauty, but which has in its promise the location for some of the most thoughtful interactions between peoples of this generation. How did that come about? Father Tracy makes reference to his coming to see this farm with Rabbi Levine. Rabbi Levine, as you may know, was trained as a lawyer in England before he came to the States. And so he and I had something very much in common arising out of his legal background. I grew up with a special respect for priests, for rabbis, for nuns, and ministers of various other faiths. And so it was natural for me to be responsive to Rabbi Levine. I was serving in the Seattle Municipal Court, and being the brash person that I was, I tried to create innovative programs that were not previously done in courts around the United States. And one of the things that I decided to do was to draw upon resources in the community. One of the persons in the community whom I contacted was Rabbi Levine.